Hey, what's up? It's Find Your Summit, episode 6. We're featuring Bart Landess, who is the executive director of the Catawba Lands Conservancy. We were on a bit of a delay today because we had some technology issues, but here we are. I'm coming at you from our Asheville cafe. I've been up here doing some wholesale work all the past couple days. But yeah, excited to talk to Bart. He works with Catawba Lands Conservancy, which is also our feature for Give Back Friday today. They're an incredible land conservation nonprofit. They're a community-based conservation organization that permanently conserve and manage over 190 properties in the southern Piedmont of North Carolina, kind of our Charlotte area. And they protect over 17,000 acres of land currently, and they're rapidly expanding. So incredible organization. They're also the umbrella organization for the Carolina Thread Trail, which connects people to each other and the land. So great organization doing awesome work. Bart is really cool. He's got over 30 years of nonprofit experience. He is also a fellow Wildcat and graduated from Davidson before going to law school at UVA, working several fundraising and nonprofit jobs, including being the vice president of major and planned gifts at Davidson for a period. He worked at the YMCA of Greater Charlotte. He worked at the Foundation for the Carolinas. So yeah, he's dipped his toes in a little bit of everything and has a lot to say about that. So we're gonna get Bart in here, and he is gonna first explain a little bit about the Catawba Lands Conservancy and the Carolina Thread Trail as organizations themselves before we launch into some of our other questions.
From Mountain Island Lake, which is our main source of drinking water, and we preserved a good bit of acreage all around Mountain Island Lake so that we just spend a lot less money and time filtering that water and making it clean. But from there, we've gone on to protect almost 17,000 acres in a 6-county footprint. And our objective is to make sure that we retain our natural heritage as well as keep our water clean and keep green spaces available for people. And that's where CTT came in. The Thread Trail was started 13 years ago because lots of our preserves have endangered species or other things, and so we actually don't allow people onto some of those preserves. But the Thread Trail is for everybody, and it's also larger. It's 15 counties, about 1,600 miles, about 300 miles of which are on the ground today, as well as some blueway, meaning spaces where you can get under the river. And the Thread Trail's objective is to connect people to nature. Catawba Lands Conservancy is about preservation, and Carolina Thread Trail is about connection. And connecting people not only to nature, but to each other. All those trails are interconnected in that 15-county region.
So the Catawba Lands Conservancy does more private conservation, and the Carolina Thread Trail does more like public lands, access type of stuff?
That's generally true. There's a little bit of both in each, but generally you got it.
Okay, great. And then can you also touch on what your job as executive director kind of involves?
My job is to not mess it up. It's a little odd because it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. When we preserve land, we preserve it literally forever.
Okay.
And so those 16, 17,000 acres are not so much ours as they're being preserved for grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. So with the acreage that's already in hand, we monitor it to make sure it's doing well, to make sure that people don't dump things on the property, to make sure that people don't do a lot of inappropriate things on the property. And then we also try to add into that acreage as much as possible. And so we have a pipeline of projects that are coming down the pike, and we have to fund those. That's the biggest part of my job, is to find the funding to make all those things happen. But we also have a staff of 18, and they do both the acquisition of those properties and the maintenance of those properties, and then the fundraising, and then the general business of running an office and in a budget. So I got a little bit of each.
So you have a lot of experience with fundraising, and you've worked in several other like major gifts jobs, but you went to law school. So I'm curious about at what point you kind of decided instead of being a lawyer, you wanted to shift towards nonprofit and fundraising.
Yeah. Let me make one distinction. I'm still a lawyer, but I haven't been in private practice for 26 years.
Okay.
And that's really the distinction, because a lot of my legal background is what enabled me to do some of the jobs that I had.
Okay.
At Davidson College and at Foundation for the Carolinas, a lot of my job was tax advice to people who were very generous in giving away money. And
Okay.
so that tax advice was the legal part. But also in those jobs did some endowment management, which actually is much more finance. And then in my current job, in addition to the fundraising, the legal part of preserving property is actually relatively complex. Both the acquisition, but also the methods of acquisition. We use essentially a tax device called a conservation easement, and the reason it's a tax device is because the donor gets a tax deduction for it, so we have to follow those regs. So the lawyer part of me is still around. I'm just not in private practice anymore, and I've had several different and unusual jobs, as you noted. So it's been fun.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things I love about Davidson is like the liberal arts background that kind of sets you up to be able to do anything when you graduate. What'd you major in at Davidson? I'm just curious.
I was a history major.
Okay, cool. And was going into nonprofit work kind of always the plan, or?
No.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was wondering. I think like we're all just on this ride of figuring it out as we go.
It's all a journey. That's right.
And when you graduated from Davidson, did you go straight to law school, or did you take some gap years?
I had 2 years in Washington, D.C., pretending to be a political person.
Yeah.
But got tired of it quickly and went to law school.
Okay, that was just always I'm always curious what people do in their years off before they decide to go back to school. One of my questions now, kind of in terms of goals, because we kind of touched on like your Davidson goals afterwards. If you could move all barriers and constraints and like money constraints and everything, what project would you pursue now and why?
For Catawba Lands or just in life?
Let's do both. Let's do Catawba Lands and then also just like personal goals.
For Catawba Lands, there are two things that are frustrating, and they both relate to timing. We preserve a lot of properties and we build a lot of trails, but those things happen relatively slowly. So if I had endless capacity, I would do both of those things much, much faster. We had 20 to 25 miles of trail a year. We had, somewhere between 100 and 1,500 acres a year, depending upon the year and what comes down the pike. But with more money, we could do a lot more of both of those things.
Yeah.
And so that was what I did for those. For life, you probably know this game. Everybody has the game of, well, if I won the lottery, then.
Then this is exactly what I do.
I was actually joking with a friend of mine about this one time and talking about, I really enjoy skiing, and I really enjoy being out west. And I was talking about buying a house out west, and he listened and put up with me for a while. And then he said, you really don't need anything. And he was absolutely right. And so I think, I've had a very lucky and productive life. And so there are plenty of things I'd love to do, including owning a ski chalet. But
Yeah.
I don't really need any of that stuff. So I probably pour it into the kinds of work that I'm doing now.
That's awesome. That's incredible. One of my questions along those lines again is that obviously donations and fundraising are vital for any nonprofit organization, but it can be intimidating to be involved with a nonprofit if you don't necessarily have funds to contribute. what is the best way for someone to support the Catawba Lands mission if donations isn't a way they can get involved?
Yeah, there's two great things people can do, and they both relate to volunteering in different ways. We have a lot of property, and it takes a lot of time and effort to manage that property. So we have volunteers who help us clear things, especially. Invasive plants like kudzu are very difficult to control. And so we'll have great people who come out and pull kudzu with us on the day. We have people who do what we call creek cleans, and we give them hip waders and they wander down the creek picking the trash out. So there's all kinds of stuff like that that people can volunteer and actually literally help us do the work of being good stewards of this property. Other thing that probably the biggest effect that an individual can have on the kind of work that we do is to participate in land planning at a very local level. Every town, for the Thread Trail, there's 88 municipalities that are involved. A little bit less for Catawba Lands because our footprint is smaller. But every one of those 88 municipalities makes land planning decisions that affect not just the trail, but the lifestyle, really, of the people who live in that community. So things about density of development and type of development and keeping spaces green and stuff, those are all decisions made at the local level. And everybody can participate in those.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, we're supporting an event next week that's kind of spreading awareness about public lands and stuff, but one of my big things about doing this event is I just want people to be aware that just because you don't have money to donate to causes does not mean that you cannot be involved in really incredible work.
Okay. Let me give you an example about that was really meaningful to me. I don't know if you know the story of the Biltmore House, but all of that land that is now the Pisgah National Forest was owned by the Vanderbilt family. And they gave it to the nation as a park. Well, very few of us have that opportunity, but in very small ways, at the local level, we can have an impact as large as that. That was 11,000 acres, and those 88 municipalities that I was talking about easily can affect 11,000 acres in the next 12 months. So all of us could end up just as wealthy as Commodore Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I want to get in a little bit more just about you personally. So we covered that you went to Davidson and then went to UVA Law and worked a lot of jobs along the way to get to where you are now, which is really incredible, and I'm sure they were all a learning experience in their own right. But I kind of want to touch on some of the people that have influenced you. Who are some of the people that have taught you the most over the years, whether it be teachers or just people you've met along the way, family members, etc.?
In recent years, as in merely the last 20, I had two great mentors and the leaders of two of the organizations I was a part of. At Davidson College, John Kirkendall is the former president who was there in the 90s, and learned an immense amount from him. And then more recently at Foundation for the Carolinas, Michael Marsicano was the leader and learned a heck of a lot from him. And they were both great mentors to me. Even further back, there were professors at Davidson that taught me a lot, but there were colleagues, friends at Davidson who are still friends. And actually, the person I told you who was listening to me and being kind about all my musing about what I was going to do when I won the lottery, that was a Davidson friend who was the one who pointed out to me that that's a nice little parlor game, but you don't need any of that stuff. And those colleagues and friends are the ones who probably have been the constant in my life for a very long time and kept me sort of able to keep perspective, and also just gave advice of all kinds all along the way, child rearing advice and all the good stuff.
Yeah, to stay grounded. And now as you've learned lessons from your colleagues and other people over the years, your father, do you translate any of those lessons to your kids? What's the like couple things that you try to really drill home with your family?
They have to put up with a lot from me. You know, my experience has been that most of the most important lessons are actually not taught directly.
Yep.
They're by observation. And what I hope that I have taught my children is to just keep going. One of the things about me is that I learned a lot of life lessons from being a distance runner. And the biggest distance running lesson is don't stop.
Yep.
Keep going, one foot in front of the other. And so I hope that one of the things that they have seen in me is that I just kept plugging away at all these various things and enjoyed them along the way. So I hope that's been meaningful. They also, and I don't know about your parents, but I think most parents talk about this. I would, I guess, nag is probably the right word, my children about doing the best that they can do. Not necessarily being the best, but doing their best. And I think that's a really, really important thing that has come through in lots of ways.
I think that that's a really important thing to reinforce, whether it be your kids, your friends, whatever, people that you admire. Just to like let people know that there's no pressure to be the greatest of all time as long as you are like really committing yourself to your cause and doing the best that you can and whatever you choose to do, which is kind of our Finder Summit idea. Just tackle things that interest you, make you happy, make you proud, and give it your all. What are you most proud of?
Probably my children. But that's sort of an easy answer. I was trying to think if I had another
No,
one.
but I think that's a genuine answer. You know, everyone I've talked to that I've asked this question that does have children, that seems to be the kind of underlying link between it all. And obviously I can't speak from experience, but, you know, it makes sense.
Well, the other thing that's a little bit not inappropriate, misleading about that answer is that I probably don't get much credit for that. they and in particular my wife, their mother, probably get most of that credit, but I'm still really proud.
Is there anything that if you could turn back time, you would tell your teenage self, like a lesson you would teach your teenage self?
Don't be such a jerk.
Be kind to people.
I think I would do that. Do your best thing.
Yeah.
There's a great story. There's a guy named Billy Payne who brought the Olympics to Atlanta in whatever year that was, 96, something like that. And I read a story about him, and he was a great athlete and, played several sports in high school and went to college on a scholarship and all that kind of stuff. And they said, well, what drives you? Because again, he'd had a useful business career as well. And he said, it was my father's advice. And they said, what was that? And he said, he never asked me how I did. The only question he ever asked was, did you do your best? And so I would tell that teenage person to always do your best, because all my regrets are things I didn't pursue as heavily as I should have.
Yeah, I think that that's an important point that we continue to learn throughout our lives, you know? I was an athlete, I swam, and it was always the times where I know I didn't try as hard as I could have done that I was upset. Even if I got placed very badly in a race, if I know I gave it my all, you can't be upset about that. I want to talk, well, actually, let's hit on this, as long as we're talking about doing our best. What makes you feel inspired and like the best version of yourself? Some people kind of like to take time to themselves outside. Some people like to read really incredible quotes and watch inspiring documentaries about people. I'm just wondering kind of like what makes you feel invigorated.
Yeah, I think I would go back to those frames I was telling you about. There's a song, I guess it's not quite current anymore, but I like me better when I'm with you.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like with those friends. They, they literally make me a better person. They, their point of view, the work that they do, the interest that they have in me and in me succeeding is all stuff that makes me better.
Yeah, at the end of the day, surround yourself with inspiring people that really understand you and inspire you. Uh, Relationships is what it's all about. Uh, I want to talk about adventure a little bit and like your life outside and kind of how you relate that to Catawba Lands. What's your earliest memory of being outdoors?
When I was very young, um, I lived in a home, excuse me, in a home that was on a lot that backed up to a creek. And so we would go down in the creek and dig around and make mud pies and, get wet and muddy and make my mom mad. Um, but we would spend hours doing that. It was great fun.
And did you encourage your kids to spend a lot of time outside when they were young, or kind of let them chart their own path?
Um, I, I did. My I grew up in Charlottesville, which when I was there was a very small town, about 25,000 people. And so I had the great good fortune of being able to just wander, and my parents would let me because there wasn't much in the way of danger around. My children did not have that advantage. We lived in a much larger urban area. I was complaining one time to my wife that our children should get out and do stuff more. And she said, "You're not going to have your children go ride their bikes on Fairview Avenue." And she was right. That's just really dangerous. However, we had the good fortune to live in Davidson for a while, and that period was much more like my youth because my kids could wander, and they could just go outside and do stuff. And we didn't have to supervise it. We didn't have to tell them what to do, any of that. So just being able to be out and enjoy things is a really, really important thing. And unfortunately, lots of kids who live in urban areas don't really get a lot of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's important to recognize the privilege associated with being able to just get out and wander. And I think that the work that things like organizations like the Catawba Thread Trail, etc., do to create spaces for people to go and spend time in natural spaces is incredibly important because, urban areas, there's not always that access.
And that's our hope, and our current biggest success. You probably know the Little Sugar Creek Trail. It currently goes from downtown Charlotte all the way out to Ballantyne, and it soon will go and it'll cross the South Carolina line. And so that's just an example of how we hope that these trails get people outside for long periods of time. It's not like you just go out and check the mail.
And connect people and places. I actually run on that trail every day.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I live right near Freedom Park, so yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. What's the biggest chance you've ever taken? This is kind of along the lines of adventure, except it doesn't have to be involving the outside. The biggest chance you've ever taken where you were completely unaware of like what the outcome would look like. I don't know if you're a planner or a go with the flow kind of person anyway, but yeah, I'm curious.
I'll give you two examples, a good one and a bad one. The good one is that when I left private law practice to go work for the college, for Davidson College, that was a big switch. And it was a very, very difficult decision and could have turned out badly. It didn't, so I'm really pleased, but could have been a misdirection. So that was a sort of a wrenching decision. The other one is something back to that teenage self. I did, well, it was me and my friends, we were caving. Western Virginia is limestone country, so there's lots of caves. And so I had all these friends who really got into caving and yanked me along, and it was great fun. And we had some pretty dramatic adventures. But one time we were in a cave, and the thing about caving, if you've ever been, there's no light. Zero. And so it's very difficult to see. You take along the rule is you always have three sources of light at any time. And we were old school. We had carbide lamps. I don't know if you ever messed with that, but they're like old school miner's lamps, you know, on your helmet and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were in this cave and we were at a spot where we knew that there was, from a map, we knew that there was another path that was below us. And we reached an opening and we were wondering if we could go down to that other spot, but our lights didn't shine that far. And so we weren't quite clear on how far it was. And so I sat on the edge, on the ledge of this area, and my friend essentially climbed down my body and was holding on to my foot, dangling his feet, trying to touch the path. And he said he couldn't touch it. And I said, well, so climb back up. You don't let go. He said, no, I think it's right there. I think I see it. I said, if you only think you see it, don't do it. He let go and dropped about 12 feet. Well, we were an hour and a half, 2 hours into a cave. If he had hurt his leg or something, it would have been really, really bad. So that was an incredibly stupid chance.
Yeah. Yeah,
A
that's
really
one thing.
dumb thing that.
I talked to a man named Robert Page a couple weeks ago who does like outdoor wilderness certifications, and we basically talked about, you know, be careful when you're outside. It is not necessarily, you know, a free for all. Know what you're doing. Plan a little bit before you go into it.
Yeah, think hard. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for talking to me. I want to start to wrap up a little bit. But before we do that, I want to ask what the big kind of your find your summit is for 2020. I know that COVID has like really kind of messed a lot of stuff up and a lot of plans up. But what do you personally hope to achieve by the end of the year, and what do you hope to kind of see the Catawba Lands wrapping up by the end of 2020?
Yeah, let me give you one that sounds like it's just nothing at all, but it actually is a big deal at the moment. And I'll give you another one that's more inspiring. The biggest deal to me is to make sure we don't lose any staff.
Yeah.
Because it's a very difficult environment, and we have a fantastic staff, and I do not want to have any of them have to depart or us have to cut them loose, either one. So that's not terribly inspiring, but boy, is it preying on my mind at the moment. The one that's more inspiring is that we've got a shot at getting a 550-acre parcel of land that is at the mouth of a creek into Lake Wiley. And it would make a huge difference in two things. One is the water quality in Lake Wiley, which is the water source for Rock Hill and Fort Mill and a whole bunch of other places. But the other thing is that if you know where Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden is, it's near there. And we could help keep that big area even more green, because the Stowe Botanical Garden is about 1,400 acres, I think. And this would be almost contiguous to that, so that would be a really, really big green space all put together.
Cool. Well, let's wrap up with a couple rapid fire questions. I do this with all my guests just to kind of hit on some things that we wouldn't hit on in other conversation. So first question, do you drink coffee?
A lot, yeah.
And how do you drink it?
Usually with a teaspoon of sugar and a little dribble of cream, but if they're not handy, I just drink it black.
Splash and dash method, as my guest from last week would call it. Okay. Do you listen to a lot of music? What album would be the soundtrack to your life?
Oh boy. I'm one of those throwbacks who likes to make playlists, and so I have all these. Now Spotify, it's changed
Spotify's
over
great,
time.
yeah.
But I like old R&B music, and
Nice.
my children used to. Well, my youngest child, I would make all these playlists and say, "Here, you need to listen to this." And I was handing him one time. He says, "Dad, even your new stuff is old." And so it would be, 65 to 85 R&B.
Nice. Um, okay, what's your favorite outdoor activity?
Generally or now?
Let's do both.
Generally, it's running. I just it's always fit me really well, and I just love it. I know that sounds funny. I know most people hate it, but it's a great thing for me. But my joints don't like it when I do that anymore.
Yeah.
I have taken up inline skating, believe it or not, but I'm not very good at it, and so I can only do it on flat, straight surfaces.
I think that's been quite a trend recently. I've seen a lot of people on the Charlotte Greenways and like skating all over the place. Yeah.
Well, see, my thing is I'm not even, well, I suppose I could do it on the greenway. What I worry about is I'm not good enough at turns. I would be running into people and knocking them over and stuff. So.
Yeah. You know, there's always room to improve. What's what's the best book you've read? That's a hard question. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one of my favorites. Best is hard, but and it does relate to the outdoors. If you've read A River Runs Through It, I just love that author's style, and the story itself is really wonderful. But it's as much as anything, it's the style of writing. I really, really like that one.
I have not read that, but I'm going to add it to my list because I love anything related to the outdoors as far as
well,
reading
the other
goes.
advantage to it is it's brief.
Great. Spot on. Sometimes I like to take stuff like that out to the woods and just like set up camp for the day and just like rip through a quick
It's
read.
a great book for that.
Yeah.
Great book for that. Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. I asked this one to everyone, and it's fun to compare answers. But fill in the blank. Happiness is.
You know, I'd have to say a puppy.
I love that. Those things that just are so innocent and just carefree.
I'm a
Yeah.
big dog lover, and there's nothing. You don't want to have a puppy for long, but if you get to have a puppy for like 15 or 20 minutes, that's just awesome.
You know, my parents got a puppy when we were home during quarantine, and yeah, I had forgotten how fun they can be and how much work they can be.
Both, yeah.
Yep. What's something you'll miss about quarantine? There's a lot of people talking about what they miss pre-quarantine, but I want to know what you're going to miss about the actual stay-at-home itself.
Do you know what's wonderful about it is the number of people who get outdoors so much more than they used to. In my neighborhood, it's actually kind of problematic because there aren't great sidewalks in my neighborhood. So there's all these people walking down the road, and they won't get out of the way because they're out having a big time. But it's wonderful because it didn't used to be like that at all. But many of the parents weren't even home. And so the idea of them out walking with their kids was just couldn't happen because they weren't there.
Yeah.
A lot of people in my neighborhood travel, all these kinds of things. But now these big family groups will be wandering down the street. And actually there's a path system in my neighborhood, and they'll be out on the paths as well. So I'll miss that because I'm betting that when everything cranks back up, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you probably won't see the families, but I'm hoping this experience is kind of like let people realize the benefits of being able to go on walks, go on runs, etc. And hopefully some of the habits will stay.
We have a couple of our trails have counters on them, and one of our trails had a 2,000% increase in usage. And so, like you, I'm hopeful, it's not going to stay at that rate. But if we can keep half of that, 1,000% increase, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more questions. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it say? Or it could just be a picture, I guess, too.
Have you ever seen, this is from ages ago, but there was a poster and it had a picture of, the blue earth, the one from outer space. Mm-hmm. And it, underneath it said, underneath it said, honor your mother.
I had a t-shirt like that when I was younger, actually.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. the end of the day, love the original mother. Okay, cool. And then final question, what are some words to live by?
Do your best.
Do your best. Yeah, wrap it up. That was a good circle back around. Yeah, it's true, and that applies to pretty much everything. All right, well, thank you for talking to me. This has been great. Again, plug for everyone watching, Give Back Friday. We're supporting Catawba Lands today. So a portion of the proceeds will go to their great organization, Catawba Lands and the Carolina Thread Trail. Yeah, and then also our event that we're doing next week, our public trust event. It's a free event, but I have it linked so that donations will go to Catawba Lands and the Southern Environmental Law Center, and also the Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy. So, yeah.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you to Summit. Appreciate both of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.